Hello, welcome to the program Spiritism Inspiring Lives. Bear in mind that we are all immortal beings or learners of ourselves. And today our theme will be about self-knowledge. What is spirit I am? This is interesting to reflect. Bear in mind that we are all on the journey of evolution. So our reflections here will be based from a transpersonal spiritual perspective, from a holistic way how we address ourselves, that we are on this journey of evolution for centuries and centuries, for many, many different existences through the law of reincarnation, each existence learning to get to know ourselves deeper, profoundly, and also day by day or through each existence, we also are developing our own free will, our own willpower, so that we can improve ourselves, therefore evolve and progress. In that way, we start with the reflections today based on the book of Genesis. Bear in mind that we are all learners, as I say already, and we need to go through and over again and look and address ourselves from different perspectives, from different angles, so that we can actually move forward in the understanding of who we are. What spirit I am means in this long journey of evolution. In which degree of evolution do I find myself? Or how do I understand myself currently? From which perspective, in which dimension? So we invite all of us, as I mentioned previously, to look within, to be open-minded, to be willing to look within ourselves, perhaps from different perspectives, so that we can also heal ourselves more and also learn more, because we cannot evolve without learning new perspectives, new theories, new associations. So the invitation here is be kind, but be available for these reflections that we start by presenting here today. We start in the book Genesis by Allan Kardec, the great French educator, who wrote this book and is in chapter 2, item 18, and I quote when he says, "We can deduce that in antiquity, at the time of Christ, in the Middle Ages, Renaissance, in short, souls of all classes existence amongst us, from the simplest ignorant to the most advanced superior spirits. This means that we will always have in our socialization incarnate souls who teach us how to be better, as well as others inferior to us that we can help for their progress. Souls who are of the same degree of advancement accompany us in our learnings, always in cooperation." We can already read between lines here the law of solidarity that is helping all of us. We have always beings who are more evolved than us in different levels in our society or even in the spiritual realm, and also others who are learning from us that we can help also through our own progress that we are stimulating within ourselves. And also to expand understanding, we refer now through the Spiritist magazine 859, when Saint Vincent de Paul says the following, I quote, "Never forget that the spirit, whatever its degree of advancement and its situation as reincarnated or in erraticity, is always placed between a superior who guides and perfects it and an inferior before whom it has the same duties to fulfill." That is so beautiful. It's almost like, in other words, saying, well, give you the hands. It's always like we give our hands each other. Those who are in front of us extend the hands towards us, and we extend the hands towards those who are in need, but we already learned. And also taking into account our theme today, self-knowledge. What is spirit I am, or am I? We refer to the Spirit's book, still by the great French educator Allan Kardec, when he, in the question 96, asked the enlightened beings, I quote, "Are all spirits equal, or is there some kind of hierarchy amongst them?" and we learn all together. They are the different orders according to their individual degree of self-purification. Self-knowledge will help us to understand that at the parting point created simple and ignorant by God, with love, we are all equal. We are all equal under the natural code of evolution, but we are in different degrees of self-enlightenment, in different degrees of self-knowledge, in different degrees of our progress, what we conquered so far through our own efforts. And he is not a superior, inferior in terms of valuing less the ones who are behind us, but seeing they are brothers and sisters in humanity who are in the same possibility of evolution, but they still are in different levels of learning. It's almost like when we look in our schools. Well, those who are in the kindergarten have one level of understanding. Those who advance later on, then they go on to university, then you go on a master, then PhD, and so on and so forth. Different levels, all conquered through their own effort. On the spiritual level, this is more or less the same. Self-knowledge, bear in mind, we are in different degrees, as I mentioned here, as we learned, through the self-purification. In order to facilitate our self-knowledge process, because it is a process throughout the different existences, we will be focusing initially on a chart here that we go through. Bear in mind, there are the third order, second order, and first order. Bear in mind, there are tendencies, characteristics, values conditions that we bring innate as what we learned so far. So the third order in groups, let's put it like that, in perfect spirits, we have 5 subgroups. Hence, the impure spirits, the frivolous spirits, the pseudo-wise spirits, the neutral spirits, the pseudos and disturbing spirits. Then if you move on to the second chart, the second order, good spirits, we have 4 subgroups. They are benevolent spirits, learned spirits, wise spirits, and superior spirits. And then the first order, the pure spirits, the first class, the higher class. These 3 levels of different groups, different orders, manifest spirits, souls, beings who are learning through these different orders, through these different dimensions that we all go through, and our goal is the pinnacle pure spirits. Self-knowledge, self-transformation, self-illumination throughout the centuries. Each soul will need different times because we are using our free will, but that will be the pinnacle of our major goal or major achievement. In order to understand a bit more, we now go back to the Spirit's book, which is helping us in part 2, chapter 1, the Spirit hierarchy, where we learn in question 100 to 113. Here we go through this chart to hopefully bring some resources that can help us to meditate, can help us to analyze, can help us to analyze ourselves in terms of awakening who we are, really, not who we think we are. Always from the departure point of a loving core essence within ourselves. On my screen is on the right, on the left side, on the top, you will see the third order of spirits, the imperfect spirits. There, when you see on the left side is the orange color, which are the 5 first ones that we saw here. Then if you move forward, is still on the left side with the violet colors, we have 4 different orders. And then on the top, we have the pure. On the right side of my screen, I don't know if that is where you see it, we have again the different classes, which are steps, dimensions that we conquer in our own progress, is spiritually referring to, through the trials of each reincarnation that we choose to undergo, or that the enlightened beings invite us to learn through. Trials are nothing more than experiences that we can challenge ourselves and becoming better than we are in promoting our intellectual and emotional intelligence. When we say emotional intelligence, we are referring to the moral aspect of ourselves. We bring all the aspects of the first class or the first order, the pure spirits. We bring all the resources, the characters and characteristics in germs within us. But as we go through step by step, we are learning also to observe through self-knowledge, understanding each day, questioning ourselves through meditation, who I am, what I'm aiming for in my life, where I choose to go from now onwards. It is relevant, fundamental, I would say, that we understand the need that we all have to invest in our studies about the universal laws in life, which are equal for every soul, every spirit, everywhere. There is only one truth that comes from God. Surely, when we study the different dimensions through the different orders of a spirit, which reflects the different degrees of evolution or self-illumination acquired so far, we can have different understanding when it comes to the universal code of values of evolution. So once we choose to navigate deeper and deeper and explore them, we are doing actually a great favor to us. We bring the truth that comes from God, the creator of everyone and everything, we bring them within ourselves. But it's our effort that we stimulate them in terms of self-knowledge to get to know who the truth is and how we navigate through our own shadows. Okay, having said that, let's start with the bottom line, which you can see, the impure ones. And I invite you, everyone, to reflect as we go through them, because we may have aspect, tendencies, or characters, or values within different orders here, in different levels, in different classes, because we already learned a lot of things in the past. Surely it's not only our shadows and imperfections, we also have superior tendencies that we are already learning when we learn through the second order, for instance. So it is what we present helps us to reflect, and then it's down to us individually to analyze ourselves, to become aware of how we function within ourselves, not who we think we are, but who we really are. So let's start with the impure, third order, the impure spirits. What is the tendency here that we can learn from? They are inclined to evil and make it the object of their concerns. As spirits, they give false advice, provoke discord, distrust, and disguise themselves in every possible way to better deceive. Their aggressive language and communications reveal the baseness of their inclinations. They do evil for the pleasure of doing so, often without reason and out of hatred for good, predominance of matter over the spirit. These are general tendencies. Of course, it requires more study. But if we take these elements into account in our self-knowledge to observe our own inner communication, then we can actually learn a lot. As we are all reincarnated in the school Earth, the great school of souls, and therefore we all still are imperfect, perfecting ourselves, we can start by thinking here, well, impure spirits, the third order, in terms of characteristics, then I can ask myself who I am. Do I bring any tendencies or any level of these tendencies? Spirits will give false advice. I may analyze myself. Do I sincerely promote honesty within myself? Is that a desire that I'm aiming to be honest, sincere? Or do I prefer lies? Or do I provoke discord among people? Bear in mind that we, all of us, through the law of God, one of them, social law, we are all involved in a social context, starting within our families. Do I have a tendency to distrust, disguise myself so that I try to appear what I'm not? Choose to manipulate people, situations. Those are shadows, inferior aspects, that once we become aware, then we can now choose to change them and learn to be loyal to a higher self, be sincere, be honest, not to promote discord anymore within our family setting, within our workplace, within our communities where we are. This is the way that we promote us as spirits as we are. There is nothing wrong through self-awareness to become aware of our shadows. I would even say that is indispensable, because otherwise we will not change what needs to be changed. We will not promote what needs to be promoted within ourselves. And as Jung already said, we need to enlighten our own shadows. That means transforming them. And we can only transform or enlighten our shadows when we become aware of them, we acknowledge them, we accept these aspects, are only aspects, parts of ourselves, and we take the responsibility and change them, creating, developing new behaviors. When they say aggressive language, baseness inclinations, do we know the tone of voice, how we speak? Do we know if our communication is aggressive or not? Those are reflections that may help. Someone may say, well, Evanise, I don't know. There is a suggestion. Record yourself when you are speaking with someone. And then later on watch. Then we find out is a way that that helps us to become aware. And then do evil for the pleasure of doing evil. As much as we enlighten ourselves, understand that essentially we are all good people, all good beings in essence. That means in germs as we have been created. So therefore, if we become aware that we really have pleasure is still to hurt others, to do evil, that actually is our imperfections. Evil is nothing more than our own old tendencies based on pride and selfishness, vanity and indifference and cruelty and so on. Once we do understand, we choose now, okay, I'm not my shadows. They are just part of me, but I can choose to free myself from. As long as we now choose to do good. And how do I do that? Where do I start? Observe what we are thinking. Our belief systems are behind our attitudes, our actions, our emotions. Antonio, boa noite. Welcome. Polly, welcome as well. And also another point to observe that if we have any resonance, any emotional response of hating others, let's use silence. Let's give ourselves some time to meditate, to understand what are the causes within hatred that we bring. Because the causes lie within us. And this is not good anymore for us. We can do better from now onwards. Choosing the greatest goal, goodness for all. And in that way, we are training ourselves. We are silencing the inner disturbance and re-educating those aspects and valuing and giving credibility to the new ones. And if someone will say, well, I cannot give free of my hate or whatever. Yes, we can. We bring innate ability to change ourselves. Mainly because all of us, we have the free will, and the free will is stimulated constantly, either when we choose to do good or when we choose to do evil. So let's use the free will consciously now, so that we potentialize the inner strengths. And the same aspect here, predominates matter over the spirit. Yes, this is the predominance on earth. This is school of souls. But that does not mean that we choose to carry on in this degree of preferences. We are here exactly to get to know who we are. And in case matter predominates the spirits in terms of values, belief systems, tendencies, likes or dislikes, then as I carry on learning, evolving in knowledge about the truth, I choose within the silence of myself to say no to certain aspects, because I have to understand that I will be the continuation of myself. And I'm here interacting with matter to spiritualize myself. That does not mean that I refuse the material aspects. I give a relative meaning to everything and every experience, and use the free will to be wiser and wiser and spiritualizing ourselves and becoming better. Then if you move on to the second degree here in the third order, imperfect spirits, which are different elements as well that help us to become aware of ourselves. Always bear in mind that essentially we are all good beings, but we still have a lot of shadows that we need first to become aware, and second to accept, and third to transform, which is the normal, natural journey, how we evolve, how we grow spiritually, how we promote ourselves. The frivolous spirits, they are ignorant, malicious, reckless, and mocking. They get involved in everything, respond to everything, without caring about the truth. They take pleasure in causing small annoyances and little jokes. Ignorance, malicious. So again, do I have any tendencies to get involved in anything? If some people are speaking, I speak over, or do I have already the inner control that I can hold back myself? Or can I analyze myself that I'm capable of seeing what goes outside, but I do not have the need to be involved in everything. I don't need to have the last word in everything. I can accept that people are as they are and promote myself further. So it's very important that when we realize that we may have some or more tendencies that represent or manifest frivolity, we may choose to change those habits, always through self-love. And then we move on to the next one. The wise, pseudo-wise, is a different journey, different step within the third order of imperfect spirits. Imperfect spirits understand there are all imperfections, because as spirits, essentially, we are all enlightened, good, loving beings. So when we say imperfect spirits, we are talking about our own imperfections as immortal beings as we are. Then the pseudo-wise says, they believe they know more than actually do. Their language has a serious quality that can be misleaded and cause misconceptions about their abilities and knowledge. It is a mix of some truth along the most absurd errors, while presumption, pride, envy, obstinacy stands out. Again, self-knowledge. What is spirit? Am I? Do I have some of those characteristics, some of those elements presented here? Do I have, through self-knowledge, the tendencies that I want to appear better than I am, just to show off, just to manipulate people or situations? We always can change that. Do I have the tendency to mislead others? Or have we conquered our ability to be more transparent, more sincere and honest with ourselves? And then it says, pride. What do I know about pride? How does pride manifest through my way of being in my daily existences? I am angry. Do I know what envy actually is and how envy manifests through my way of being in terms of my thoughts, my thinking, my belief system, my emotions, my behavior? So it's important that we observe as learners of ourselves. And then if you move on, it's still in the third order of inferior spirit, imperfect spirits, as I mentioned, imperfect spirits, meaning all imperfections as immortal spirits. Then we move on to the neutral one, where we learn about some characteristics saying they are not good enough to do good, nor evil enough to do harm. They lean equally towards one option or the other. They do not rise above the common level of humanity in terms of both morality and intelligence. They are attached to material things and mourn the loss of the vulgar pleasures they have left behind. Again, when I take these characteristics into account, through self-knowledge, observe, analyze myself. Do I have this neutral position? Or I am already positioned what my option is. Is it doing good or doing bad or not really in the middle, let's put it there. When we say advancement in terms of morality and intelligence, each aspect, each soul in evolution, we evolve in evolving, progressing, advancing in our intellectual intelligence, conquering wisdom in relation to the divine science, morality, meaning developing our emotional intelligence. So it's almost like learn and also feel in doing the goodness. The universal law is based in love. The love that is universal. The love that is good for everyone. So this is how we are gradually, step by step, advancing. And if you move on, it's still in the third order imperfect spirits, is the disturbing ones that we learn. They can fit into all the classes of the third order. They generally manifest their presence through sensible and physical effects. They appear more than others, attached to matter. They seem to be the main agents of the vicissitudes of the elements of the globe. We can see here in the third order of imperfect spirits, as I mentioned, I repeat, that means the imperfections of the soul of the spirit in evolution, that we may find that we have different shadows, imperfections from the different 5 degrees of glasses here within the third order. And I repeat again, it's fundamental when we become aware. Now we choose to heal those aspects and change. Now we move forward to the second order of Buddhist spirits, which we also, as souls, as the spirits, we can also have certain elements already developed. Every soul, every being needs to develop self-awareness in order to observe where we find ourselves. So we are in the second order of Buddhist spirits, benevolent, and then the 5th class. The predominance, the characteristics are, their dominant quality is kindness. They take satisfaction in serving and protecting others, but their knowledge is limited. Their progress is greater in the moral sense than in the intellectual sense. We cannot evolve the intellectual and moral dimensions in the same time. One existence is very short time when we take into account the childhood period, adolescence, and then later on, sometimes we have in our program of reincarnation to go back to the spiritual world when we are 40, 50. So we don't have that much time. It's impossible in one existence. But it's possible at once, either in intellectual or on the moral level, in every existence. I would even go further. I would say in every moment of our existences, if we choose to do that. Gradually, always bear that in mind. Then we move on to the learned, second order of good spirits, the learned. What can I learn about myself? The main characteristics, they are less concerned with moral issues than with scientific ones, for which they have more attitude, free from the passions that are characteristic of imperfect spirits. Here we see in this second order, they already freed themselves from the inferior orders. And that is our journey, our destiny, how we have been programmed by God. As long as we carry on, we insist, we persist in learning, in educating ourselves. So here again, the wise, the learned, they conquered a lot of knowledge. They developed a lot their intelligence in terms of conquering the wisdom from the divine science. Consider the impure spirits, the previous ones, the inferior ones, but they are not yet perfect. They still have a lot to learn. Even us, when we have some aspects in this second order, which are the good spirits, we have plenty to learn also. Then we move on to the second order, the third, which is wise spirits. They are characterized by moral qualities without possessing unlimited knowledge. Again, we see here, we are reminded, they already characterize the moral, the emotional intelligence, where we develop it on a daily basis when we exercise the virtuous aspects. when we become more gentle, more forgiving, more loving, when we become more tolerant, more considerate, when we are more fraternal, when we develop more solidarity towards each other, when we cooperate for the goods of all wherever we are engaging, relating in developing our own emotional intelligence. That is a gradual process. Now, if we move forward, it's still in this scale, the superior spirits, as I mentioned previously, the superior spirits, they are not yet perfect. We all are on this journey. The tendencies is there, they bring together science, wisdom, and kindness, elevated language. Can we see the difference here in terms of language when we think self-knowledge? What spirit am I? I can see through this scale that the language on the third order, the bottom line, in imperfect spirits, their language is very baseless. And here, when we are in the superior level, the second class, in the second order, we see that the language is of elevation, meaning navigating within the level of the universal code of goodness. That we developed our inner resources, either on a mental level and also on an emotional level, ourselves, using our free will, that we discern, that we filter, and even the wisdom, the knowledge that we conquer helps us also to promote our old versions. And then we reach the final one, the pure spirits, the first order or the first class, absolute morality, messages of God. On that level, when we reach the first order, which is developing the values of the soul according to the universal code of love, on that level, we no longer need to reincarnate. But up to that level, we still are evolving through the trials, through each reincarnation, which is a blessing for us. Reincarnation, new body, old soul, old systems, old values, old patterns, which through each new trials that we attract for ourselves, trials is nothing more than new experiences or old experiences that we are redoing. Why? Why are they important? So that we use now currently our free will in choosing to think in different ways, more and more according to the laws of love. And in that way, we are also promoting ourselves and promoting others, evolving, progressing, and healing ourselves. Now, having said that, let's explore that a bit further. Understanding within the book Saúde das Emoções de Alívio de Cerqueira Filho, when he says, and I quote, self-perception is developed through the exercise of discernment. That is, learning to discern how thoughts, emotions, and behaviors originate, with the goal of reinforcing them with balanced and transforming them when unbalanced. This is self-perception. Self-perception is very important because it reflects our inner world, our inner self. The experiences outside us, sometimes they are neutral and we can really get things wrong, because as Alírio helps us here to say how we develop self-perception, it is through learning to develop discernment. And we cannot develop discernment unless we develop self-awareness on a daily basis, to pay attention to what we think, what we feel, what are our intentions, our motivations behind our decisions, our initiatives. And he says that is learning to discern how thoughts, emotions, and behaviors originate. So it's almost like through self-awareness to navigate within and find the causes of my thoughts, my emotions, why I'm thinking what I'm thinking, how I'm feeling, why I'm feeling this way. What is that telling about me, my individuality, my personality, with the goal, with the aim to reinforce when they are according to the second order of spirits, the characteristics that we just went through previously, or transforming them when there are aspects, values, tendencies that come from the third order of inferior spirits that we just went through. So if you want to go back again, which is very valuable in order to understand ourselves. And then we move on here when we learn. Various transpersonal psychological approaches tell us about the existence of two structures in our psyche. The one is called ego, and the other is called by various names: self, deep self, higher self, or as we prefer, essential being. We are essentially beings of love. The self that sometimes we learn is the essential being as every and each one of us are. Also, the essential self is the divine, loving essence that every human being is, made in the image and likeness of the Creator. The ego is the result of the imperfection and ignorance that still exist within us, formed of two faces. One evident, characterized by the lack of love, and another masked by self-love. Self-knowledge. What spirit am I? So here, when we look here, do I know that I have in my psyche the dimension of the ego and the dimension of the self? Do I know that the dimension of the ego within myself is formed of two faces? Do I know that one is the evident, and which is characterized by the lack of love, and the other one is the masked by pseudo-love? And what do I understand about this dimension? Comprehending that essential being is the center of the consciousness, where all the individual's positive traits and true values are anchored. We all bring this core center of love within ourselves as essential beings, as we say, where individuals' positive traits and values, those that we conquered already, or those that we bring in germ that still need to be stimulated and developed. But we all bring these positive traits, the true values. Let's see if we understand a bit further. All the noble feelings that characterize us, all the values derived from the energy of love that composes it, originate from the essential being. So every value that we carry within that does not originate from the essential being, we can go back to the scale of the third, second, and first order of spirits, which are characteristics, tendencies, or values, concepts that we bring within ourselves. If they are negative, they are not originated from the essential being as we essentially are. In our journey of evolution, the main point, the main objective to be reincarnated, it is to get to know who we essentially are and what we choose and how we choose to develop the new ways of being, the real values from the energy of love. Do we have an idea which values would that be? The energy derives from the energy of love. Do we know which kind of values, concepts, habits, tendencies that we all as immortal beings need to develop, stimulate? Remember, bear in mind, we bring the germs of love within the essential being. But sometimes we may not have trained that or stimulated them, or sometimes we may have learned to some degree, to some level. For us to have resources in our own meditation, self-analysis, we present some references here. Essential being love. Essential being the energy of love, examples of its derived values. If you want to observe ourselves within, we have here some characteristics. Essential being, the love within every individual. How do we conquer that? How do we stimulate that? Resources here. Charity, developing charity, courage, honesty, faithfulness, devotion, sincerity, trustfulness, self-confidence, solidarity, tolerance, indulgence, tranquility, self-esteem, benevolence, responsibility, gratitude, forgiveness, equilibrium, fraternity, patience, calmness, equality, flexibility, self-control, humility, kindness, collectedness, harmony, serenity, acceptance, happiness, resignation, obedience, duty, discipline, respect, punctuality, brotherhood, tenderness, loyalty, fidelity, persistence, cooperation, joy, hope, etc. All of those are characteristics that we will be stimulating throughout the different existences in promoting ourselves from the third order of spirits to the pure spirits. Here we have some elements that can help us to think about, to analyze ourselves. Surely the essential being is an electromagnetic energy field that can be expanded or inhibited depending on the outer layers that make up the ego. So as more as we may be training the essential being's values, which are expression of love, which is training to love ourselves and others, which we are expanding if we are practicing it on a daily basis, not always succeeding, that is part of learning, but making efforts to succeed, then we are expanding the love. We are expanding the electromagnetic field of goodness, of love within ourselves. Then or if we are not developing, because we have our own tendencies from, let's say, the ego state of mind, then we are inhibiting it temporarily, because we all are evolving. That makes up the ego. The ego understands here because the ego is the center of our consciousness. But what we are learning here with Alira de Cerqueira Filho is that our own shadows cover these elements of the essential love. So in that way, temporarily, we can inhibit that. And that is the cause of a lot of conflicts, a lot of draining our own energy. Let's understand a bit more how that is. We can even start here to ask ourselves where I am in my self-knowledge process on a daily basis. What predominates within myself, the tendencies of the ego or the soul? What commands my life on a daily basis? The values, the characteristics, the elements of the soul or the ego? The ego, you can see in a picture, or on shadows. The soul are the elements on the virtuous level that we are conquering based on the essential love, as I just showed to you. And here we have also a different chart that we can reflect about ourselves in increasing our self-awareness. Then we have which will cultivate in yourself. We have on our left side the ego, the false self, me. On the right side, the soul, true self, we. Here again, we have some elements that helps us to develop self-analysis, self-knowledge, and that we can promote the inner growth if we want to in this existence, because it's up to us. But here we have references of the ego, which is pretty much based on me, and on the self, the true self, we. Then it starts the me. First, I always say on the ego side, and then the soul side. Separateness, honest, judgment, compassion, ignorance, enlightenment, hostility, friendliness, resentment, forgiveness, pride, humble, complaint, gratitude, jealousy, non-possessive, fear, anger, happiness, power, equality, materialism, spiritualism, perceived knowledge, wisdom, war, peace, indifference, empathy, past, future orientated, not now orientation, self-importance, importance of others, egoism, altruism, self-denial, self-acceptance, putting on the mask, being authentic, constant busyness, stillness, internal chatter, quiet, meditative, seeking, knowing. This chart also helps us to observe ourselves if we intend to go further. The tendencies of the ego and self. Even if we find out the tendencies of the ego, we can always promote them because we have on the right side the elements and characteristics of the self. Then moving forward, the ego is the layer of ignorance that surrounds the essential being, as we showed in the previous slides, where all mistaken experiences are recorded, in which we did not put essential love into practice. It is our lesser inferior self, as we mentioned previously. It's the center of the consciousness, but is covered by our inferiorities. It is composed of two parts, as we mentioned previously. Let's study them now in more details. Evident face of the ego is the part of the ego where all the feelings that represent an absence of corresponding essential value are recorded. These feelings originate from the energy of lovelessness that makes up the ego. Are we loving ourselves? How do we do that on a daily basis? Do we know what we think? Do we think that we are lacking the values of the essential being? Are we putting efforts into to conquer them? Are we capable to expand the electromagnetic field of the essential being from in outwards? Those are the questions. If you don't know, someone will say, "Well, I don't know, Evanise, if I have the evident face of the ego." Again, sometimes pictures helps us to understand a bit better. So we present the evident face of the ego, egoic emotions from the energy of the lack of self-love. You see here the center essential being love is the pink chart that we present previously. Now we have the second layer, the green, that you see the evident face of the ego, lack of self-love, which we present some characteristics here, and understanding if we reinforce these characteristics or if they are dominant in our psychic, we are suffocating the essential being, the love, as it is in the picture. Which kind of characteristics would be those? For example, pride, selfishness, violence, hatred, oppression, rivalry, anger, egocentrism, disrespect, stubbornness, self-punishment, indifference, laziness, antipathy, sadness, idleness, self-puritanism, insecurity, melancholy, unhappiness, cunning, anguish, hostility, fear, gossip, guilt, cruelty, anxiety, frustration, dependency, aggressiveness, revolt, despair, manipulation, rejection, irritation, irresponsibility, vanity, pride, slander, rebelliousness, envy, rage, jealousy, attachment, opposition, etc. They are not conclusive. They are much more than. But when we have those already as elements to analyze ourselves so that we can become more aware and also be willing to re-educate ourselves. We presented the essential being, the loving characteristics previously. We can always go back in the slides and analyze how do I then diminish the power of this energy based on the evident face of the ego in terms of characteristics, when I can now train the essential being's values, which are based on love. All of the characteristics based on the essential being, love, presented in the previous slides, they are training exercises that we are stimulating the love within ourselves. And in doing so, we are actually shifting the energy field within our minds, within our psychics. Then we move on here, understanding that all negative feelings merely represent the egoic movement of the non-worth and are therefore transient. They exist as long as we do not make ourselves available to cultivate the real feelings that are essential. Everything that is based on the shadow is transitory. The ego's defense mechanisms are unconscious processes used by the ego to cope with internal conflicts, anxieties, and desires that are incompatible with reality or moral principles. These mechanisms function to protect individuals from potentially painful feelings by preventing direct access to the psychic content perceived as threatening. It's fundamental that we allow to go through the painful movement of self-knowledge and self-transformation, because hiding ourselves behind our own shadows or imperfections, we keep on disturbed and in conflict and very weak, I would say. So it's important that we understand that our perception about people and experiences is based on either identification with the ego's tendencies or the self's aspects that we are developing. Ego's defense mechanism, the ego's masks, it is the disguised mask part of the ego, where the ego uses its instruments to defend and escape. We can even ask ourselves, do I have any masks that I may defend myself from or escape from my limitations? Let's see here again what we can learn here in this way. Masks originate from the energy of pseudo-love. I pretend is not genuine, in which the individual, consciously or not, masks the negativities of the ego with apparently positive feelings, such as euphoria, self-pity, perfectionism, pseudo-forgiveness, maritime, puritanism, etc. So, in order to help us in our self-awareness process, that we can look within and identify ourselves better in terms of our egoistic tendencies or altruistic tendencies, we present this chart, the masked face of the ego, ego's defense mechanisms. Here, I would call your attention again. See the essence, the center of the chart, essential being, love, where we started previously. Then we have the evident mask of the ego, lack of self-love, which we saw previously. Now we have the third round here, masked face of the ego, pseudo-love, such as denial, self-puritanism, fanatism, victimization, euphoria, salvatism, salvatinism, projection, rationalization, perfectionism, identification, displacement, compensation, etc. We won't have time here tonight to go through the different masks of the ego, the defense mechanisms, but everyone can also take the initiative to study them. But quite often we have one of them or some of them that is still maybe, let's say, screaming within ourselves, and we can learn to get to know, accept those aspects, and then transform them, as we are all on the journey of loving more ourselves. When observing superficially masked feelings, one gets the impression that they are real, but if we analyze them deeper, we realize that they are false. They seem real, but they are not, as they remain a known value that originates from the energy of pseudo-love to cover up feelings stemming from lovelessness. This is so important, the self-awareness process, in terms of asking ourselves, what spirit I am? We here are bringing some reflections today that we can consider. So whatever we present that is not, that comes from our lovelessness placed within ourselves. And we have the great opportunity in each moment to address that. Masks can, when energized, prevent deeper contact with the essential self. Because by pretending to cultivate essential values, the individual crystallizes them, the false feelings. So let's try to be honest, sincere. Yes, it is challenging sometimes to be honest with ourselves, because the ego will stream, or the tendencies that we always conditioned ourselves, and they were there through pride and vanity and so on and so forth. But now we learn in other aspects. Although it may be initially a bit challenging, later on we feel freer, we feel stronger, we are stimulating the high self-esteem, we are stimulating the virtuous aspects in our minds, or the essential values based on love, as we previously presented in one of those slides that we can go back and analyze. The greatest difficulty we encounter in the search for self-knowledge is the confusion that arises between the being we are and the ego we have. The being we are, go back to the slide that I presented, essential being, love. This is what we really are, not the ego we have. There are aspects, conditions, habits that we learn either in this existence or in others that are not based on the true values of the essential love. And we can upgrade ourselves constantly. Hello, Lourdes, welcome as well to be here with us. Welcome. Then, who am I? Refers to what is permanent, surely, not what is impermanent. What we carry on expanding throughout existence, not what we leave behind. And here we have the chart, ego, self, and shadow. How I present myself, who I am, and deeper influences. Then we also have understanding that pride is the absence of value of being humble. Selfishness is the absence of altruism. Anxiety is the absence of serenity. When we are fixated, timid in the exercise of being, we are living the unreal of non-being. So let's try to be more realistic, more honest, more sincere with our internal intentions, in our thoughts, in our habits, that we can constantly promote us a bit further, because this is the objective of our existence. The ego is just the non-movement of the essential being. When the essential being does not act, the ego, which is not real, positions itself. Pay attention to this reference because it's true. If we are conscious or not, this is how we relate internally in our own individuality. We can then summarize that self-knowledge is the movement of discernment, seeking to perceive within ourselves the egoic feelings, treating them as transient emotions that can be controlled and transformed through the development of permanent feelings originated from the essential being, which we presented back in our talk tonight. Just going back, we have many references that we left there. When we use discernment, reflecting our own emotions, self-control becomes a task that can be accomplished for all of us. Unfortunately, most people, instead of controlling the evident egoic emotions, identify with them, giving them free rein or try to repress and block them, creating the masks of the ego. Process of escaping reality that only delays the encounter with the essential being that we are. Let's no longer delay it, because we deserve to love ourselves more and love others more as well, so that we promote ourselves. Emotional balance originates from evident egoic feelings, which we already referred previously, and then understand that when we come into contact with these feelings, it is common to identify with them, resulting in blockage of the energy centers of the self. So when our shadows are predominating, we are intoxicating ourselves. And we are here to promote ourselves, actually. There is no reason to feel guilty when we realize that we have our own imperfections. But there is always the moment that we can do more good towards ourselves, that we can favor the development of the characteristics of the essential being, all of those aspects that I mentioned before, and leave it up to you to go back and think about. The disidentification of the ego will produce in the spirit's fluid body and in the physical body a congestion or inhibition of the energies that sustain them. A fact that will cause the person who is identifying with negative feelings, discomfort, unease, disharmony, imbalance, and physical and mental illnesses. So it's important to observe that when we come, this happens because the ego is located energetically in the physical body and in the first layer of the fluidic body, which is the perispirit. Essentially, we are three-dimensional: a spirit, perispirit, and the physical body. So again, whatever happens on the spiritual level is impacted on psychological and emotional level and communicates through the physical level. Yeah? The disidentification is a natural consequence of acceptance. It is necessary to recognize and accept our negative feelings, but we are not negative in essence. That is fundamental. And so as we are coming to the end of our reflections today, again, for us to have resources in developing our own self-analysis, self-knowledge, that we can analyze the tendings of the ego and the self, the false self and the true self, that we can go through later on when we analyze here. We leave these charts here for having resources to reflect on in terms to increase our self-knowledge, because we are all souls in evolution on earth. And also here again, as more as we expand love within ourselves and expand the faculties of the superior being, the essential being, the self, we will end up actually promoting the soul in relation to the truth. And we are moving into the reference of we in the world and not me anymore. And to finalize then, to understand that the transmutation of the egoic feelings is achieved through identification with the feelings of the essential self, and consequently through the practice of acts of love for ourselves and others. Identification with the energy of love will enhance the essential self, resulting in the enlightenment of the ego. The ego is the center of the consciousness, but needs to be enlightened with the various characteristics of the essential being, the self. And in that way, we are favoring, promoting our own healing, our own evolution, our own progress as unique beings in the universe that we all are, essentially beings of love. And in that way, I'm coming to the end with my reflections today, hoping that they may help you in your self-awareness process, that we can embrace the wisdom that is presented to all of us in the school earth, in promoting us further day by day, and believing that we can do that because we bring innate the ability to actualize ourselves in any situation, in any position where we find ourselves transitory. In that way, as we come to the end, I am very grateful for all of you and also wishing you much peace and hoping you to see any future possibility and opportunity.